Chapter 6. Uninvited.
Vomit splatters across the thatched mud from the bent Caroline. Protecting her basket stands, Smoke, relieved she missed the sweet grass. No longer enticed by the remaining shingles of hay collecting moisture in the pasture, he favored the grass patches there versus the yard. Caroline had spent the previous 2 days searching for a way to escape while avoiding the farmhouse. She relied only on what she could find to get by. She cultivated a bucket of milk from the cows in the backyard, but the milk was sour from wild pastures. Her meals resembled an odd soup, along with wild berries and mushrooms from the forest, which she had wrapped in a handkerchief. She recalled warnings from her father's medical officers and worried about the water she was drinking. Caroline was determined to sustain herself until Thomas arrived and was ready to brave the house for a better way of living if she were to remain in wait. She fervently carried the basket of eggs, the bucket of milk, and the swaddling salad into the house and shut the door securely, leaving Smoke bewildered with his cud in the yard. The kitchen is enveloped in a serene atmosphere, occasionally interrupted by the rhythmic crackling of the iron fire. Caroline stands tall and confident, leaning against the sturdy butcher's block, her eyes fixed on the service station, waiting eagerly for the master to enter. Inhaling deeply, Caroline tries to dispel the anxiety that has been building inside her and exhales slowly, calming her nerves. She knows she is alone in a house devoid of life, yet she summons all her courage and determination to begin her work. She sets out her materials and tools, with a tremor for a hand and a hurricane for a head. Fumbling through a stranger's methods, Caroline ignores the whispers at her back. As she stands in the kitchen, she can't help but feel her mind wander to thoughts of Melody and Thomas. Every forced thought leads her down a path that reminds her of a cherished memory with Melody or a hopeful dream about Thomas. Caroline tries to focus on cooking, but her growing frustration causes her to drop eggshells into the mix not once but twice. She takes a deep breath, tries calming herself down, and carefully retrieves the shell pieces from the bowl. However, she accidentally knocks over the borrowed bowl on her third attempt. After a moment of frustration, Caroline finally manages to calm herself down. She decides to start over, cracking 2 fresh eggs onto a skillet coated in lard. With a deep sigh, she takes the meal and oats back to the pantry, ready to start again with a more straightforward recipe.
As Jimmy stood at the valet, he couldn't help but notice the foreboding hotel in front of him. Its long red tongue rolled out from its mouth, almost as if beckoning him inside. A horse-drawn carriage was parked in front of him, where several bellhops were unloading travel-sized trunks that had all been tallied in Jimmy's log. Down the road, an empty flatbed trailer sat propped up beside scores of barrels and crates, with its tongue leaning against the pilot's perch. Suddenly, a limousine screeched to a halt on the welcome mat in front of the mess, its half-pair of headlights illuminating the area like cross-eyed spotlights. Peering through the passenger window, Jimmy couldn't help but wonder if he would be the one driving after seeing the bruises on the vehicle.
"You're driving,"
burps Tommy, and he slides over to free up the captain's seat. Jimmy hands the leather-bound ledger over to obliging black hands from the desk and circles the automobile, taking his hat and coat from the stand. In the car, he fakes a smile back at the toothy Tommy and waves his hand in front of Tommy's crooked nose to scold the inebriated fool. Jimmy pulls down from the Grand and takes a side road off Grand Hill before starting in on Tommy.
"Were you not supposed to pay off the municipals tonight, and you're out on a tear? What if he phones down to Chicago about missing hush money?"
Tommy is laughing, and his arrogance is aggravating Jimmy.
"I did."
Tommy is allowed to defend, and Jimmy cools off a little. Processing what he's just heard, Jimmy stops the car, realizing Tommy must have been drunk in front of the lawman.
"You were this blotto in front of the sheriff."
Tommy sits up and shakes his head no while stifling a laugh, then produces his supply from his jacket in the cherished silver vessel. Jimmy holds the flask and balances it up and down. Realizing its weight is all there, Jimmy cannot imagine the straight-laced cop having his own stash and must challenge the claim.
"No way,"
Jimmy exclaimed.
"I know. Son of a snitch has been holding out."
Tommy says as they pull away.
Fool nearly got himself stuck offering me a drink, all cheeky like. It's all Jake, though Fool got ossified right in front of me. We killed off his 15 years of back home hooch shooting the breeze.
He exaggerates a little, and despite the buzz, feels a tinge of guilt. Tommy was pretty sure that Sinclair had, in fact, rung him under the table. Jimmy laughs as they pull onto the beach road.
Best I ever had.
Tommy brags. Waiting inside the Silver Birches estate, King over Queen completes a stack of hearts for Claire's silly game. Jimmy bounces the limousine's frame against the holes of the terrible trails that were never intended for automobiles near a rock formation called Devil's Kitchen, with a cursing bang heard from the brothel's parlor. Only Tommy got away on the tight corner against the bluff without taking a ding or a crawl, and Claire determined he couldn't be driving. Disappointed, Claire had counted on him being sober to chill his compatriot, but now suspected Tommy was decommissioned for the night. Carlotta would be sent to meet a man from the city tonight, and Jimmy's reaction would not benefit from having his friend in the back. Carlotta sits beside Claire on a thin white sheet, taking in the fire beneath the mantel. Her pale white breasts and rosy nipples stand featured beneath the false robe, all accented by the careful artistry of Claire and her brush. When the parking brake is set, little black hairs from her long neck stand tall. The remaining beads of black stand bound in a tight bun behind her head as she sits and waits to allow for the rest of the night's events to unfold. When the boys enter, Carlotta sits resolutely with her back to the door as Jimmy's glee dies at her rear, refusing her affection for the first time. The palette of makeup lies on the table between them, and a new robe is hung, waiting for transportation to a private affair in the penthouse suites of the Grand Hotel. Jimmy realizes he is to deliver his beloved to the hands of a stranger, and stands heartbroken with his hat in hand. Tommy's night had just begun, and he ran up the stairs past the lace to find Serena. Thursday pours tea to Claire, who shuffles beside her velvet ledger, and refuses to acknowledge the subordinate standing in the draped foyer. Jimmy's heartbeat reaches his ears before he can quell the urge to lunge at the calculating woman. Thursday notices his emotions climaxing and reaches for a knife holstered in her belt. Jimmy sees the move and snaps to wiser form, still brooding but under control. He leaves to wait in the cab before the dangerous scenario escalates.
You go too,
Claire says malevolently to Thursday. Together, Carlotta and Thursday exit the brothel, and Jimmy waits obstinately in the driver's seat as Thursday opens the door. Helping with a long white free train on Carlotta's robe, Thursday shoots daggers at the front seat with her eyes when she bends down away from Carlotta being able to notice. With a disgruntled expression, Jimmy yanks the string to shut the curtain abruptly. However, instead of finding the satisfaction he was hoping for, the folds of the curtain neatly tucked him away, leaving him to pout in frustration. Carlotta sits with a porcelain posture, blankly looking to the lake as the limo pulls away. Thursday bounces on the bench beside her with the limo restlessly bounding down the lakeside dirt road. There's no space for Carlotta's concern while silent wars persisted around her, and like so many others, she found herself lost in her family's secret duty. Casting true desire to the forgotten waves, she feels she cannot afford to cater to the tantrums of her love, and sits steadily behind her own wall of lace.
A burst of bombastic flowers illuminated the night sky. As the trio made their way forward, guided by the flickering flashlight in Carly's hand. The evening's lecture had come to a grand finale, with Carly passionately discussing the use of old literature repurposed in new works and the growing ignorance of recycling old material. Despite her audience's lack of understanding, Carly's enthusiasm was infectious, and her ramblings were always illuminating. Her demonstrations often resulted in her own better understanding, leaving the boys wildly impressed by her curiosity and intelligence. As the group continued along the hidden trail, cascading boulders provided a makeshift podium for Carly, who spoke over her shoulder to the boys, trying to keep up with her in the dark. Billy found amusement in pretending to understand what she was saying whenever she looked his way, while James remained somewhat paranoid and apprehensive. As the others proceeded along the road's edge at the base of the bluff, James stayed behind to inspect the trees that barricaded the rising hill, feeling as though something was following them. In the darkness of the night, James finds himself surrounded by mysterious figures, their faces concealed by hoods. He frantically searches for the flashlight and his friends, but before he knows it, a shadowy figure strikes him down, and he tumbles into a nearby ditch. His friends are also in fierce battles against their assailants, fists and black sleeves clashing in the darkness. Suddenly, the flashlight falls to the ground, illuminating the scene as Billy manages to grab hold of one of his attackers and pull him up toward the sky. Thudded blows echo through the air as the two fighters struggle against each other before eventually being pulled apart by the sound of a switchblade. Still pinned against the ground, James tries to catch a glimpse of the silver firefly of a knife darting across the sky between the men standing above. Hoping for a sign of hope or safety from above while still on his back, James doesn't get it, instead a gag. Then the knife finds him when it rolls beside him in the chest of Billy, his guardian. Carly sobs as Billy's body is dragged off and can only muster no repeatedly when they come for her one after the other. Again and again, she struggles and mutters as James can only listen to the vicious men attacking Carly. They make several comments about her asking too many questions at the party earlier, and it becomes clear that she is their target. When neither James nor Carly can struggle anymore, and both lie defeated beside the road, the men leave. The last to depart leaves threats of reprisal should she stir up more of the Mackinac Siren story in town. Final blows are delivered to James, hitting his gut and groin, but he can only think of his friends before blacking out, listening to Carly's sobs against the waves.